You're on the Six Screens Telenetwork, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited in exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society. And now, the end is near.
Well, hello everyone and welcome in. We have got a program tonight you do not want to miss. Barbara Anderson, Watchtower researcher, tells all. She's got a program tonight. Don't go anywhere, really. Just stay with us, and you're going to hear some things here tonight that's really going to shake you. Barbara Anderson has been involved with the Watchtower for many years. She worked at the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, and she's going to share things with us that is really, really remarkable. She's going to help so many people to find out about the Watchtower, and I think that's really wonderful. Now, Barbara Anderson does have some feelings, and I certainly appreciate her feelings concerning the Watchtower. And when you listen to her story tonight, you're going to see why she has these feelings, but yet there's some ugly sides of the Watchtower she's going to share with us tonight as well. So we're going to bring Barbara on right now. Let's bring her in here right now. We got her in the back room. Now she's in the front room. Hello, Barbara.
Hi, Rick.
So, have you ever been in the back room of the Kingdom Hall?
No, I don't think. Oh, yeah, when I was had the disfellowshipping hearing that I walked out on. I guess that's the back room.
Well, anyways, we're glad to have you on with us tonight, and we're going to be talking about some things here tonight. And I'm gonna work with you so that we can really get a good overview of you being involved with the Watchtower and how it all started and all of this, because people have been asking me, could you ask Barbara this? Could you ask Barbara that? So I put together a bunch of questions that I would love to be able to ask you. So we'll be doing that tonight, Barbara, and trying to get you reined in here and tell your story so people can really see and understand the real Barbara Anderson. I think they'll really appreciate it tonight. So thank you for coming on, as we say. And we do have a really good large audience listening in on YouTube and Facebook. We're on about 10 different platforms here tonight. So don't you guys be shy to write in and ask comments. If you have comments that you'd like to ask questions for Barbara, we'll look at those on all of our platforms. And then later on, we're going to open up the lines. But we just want you just to listen. And then after Barbara's talking for a while, we'll be able to bring you guys on and you can talk to her. So, Barbara, just to make sure we got a good mic check here, to make sure there's no problems with the microphone, count to 5 for me.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right, that's good. I think you're pretty close to your microphone there, are you? That's good.
I know.
All right, so that's good, because we really want to hear everything you have to say. And so why don't we do this? I'd like to go back. I always call it to the scene of the accident. And you say, well, what is the scene of the accident? That's when you first became one of Jehovah's Witnesses. But let's first of all ask this question. Barbara, many people are wondering, where did you grow up? I know you're in Tennessee now, but where did you grow up?
I was born in East Meadow, New York. That's Long Island.
All right, so you're a New York girl.
Yeah, I lived until I was 16.
And 16 is when you left New York.
Yeah, my father and mother moved to Miami.
So, okay, so let's just do this. Why don't you just fill us in on what it was like when you were growing up in New York? First of all, did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had a brother, older, 3 years older than I am. He's deceased now.
All right, he's not with us now. But yeah, these are the questions people have been asking me. So let's do this. Let me say this to you. When you were a young girl, I talked to you the other day. You really loved God, didn't you? You were a Catholic, right?
That's right.
So
we were considered nominal Catholics. Both parents were kind of indifferent, although they called themselves Catholic, and we were baptized as Catholic, my brother and I.
All right. So you grew up as a Catholic. Now, you mentioned to me the other day when I was talking with you that your mother and father really didn't go to the Catholic Church much, but you like to do it.
Well, I had a lot of questions about religion. A lot of kids do, because they want answers to why we're here. And that was my question. So I went to Sunday school and I asked questions, but people didn't have answers for the kind of questions I asked. So, but I still went. And with the family, we went on Easter and also Christmas. The family all dressed up, and I had the first communion, and also I was had at 7, and confirmation when I was 12.
All right. So you're a young girl, but you really were considered to be Catholic, and you were following the Catholic faith, and you like to read the Bible, and you were doing all of the things that the Catholicism wanted you to do, and you were kind of connected with them. Now, what would be of concern here is a lot of people have asked me, well, how did Barbara Anderson ever get involved with the Jehovah's Witness movement? And that's something that I often wondered too. We never really got into it much, but talking to you this week, you really shared a lot of information with me that really was enlightening. So why don't you give us, I love the story. I love the story so much. Give us a story on how you became one of Jehovah's Witnesses when you were a young girl.
I was about 13, and I was reading the Bible, but I gave up on it because I thought it read from cover to cover, and the story began and it ended at the end. But I get through Genesis and I go over and over the same thing: who begat, So anyway, I just figured there weren't any answers, and so one day my girlfriend and I were together at her house doing our homework, and there was a knock at the door, and there was a woman there who wanted to speak to the lady in the house. And my girlfriend, she answered the door, and then she went to get her mother, and her mother said, "Oh, I know who that is." She said, "Just get rid of her." And so my girlfriend, she was embarrassed, and she said she didn't want to do that. And I said, "I'll do it." And the woman who was there was Italian, very, very nice, outspoken woman. And she was, found out later, she was a regular pioneer, and it was hot. And she was walking in her territory. And where we lived, there were developments. And so she was really tired out. She didn't have a car. Her husband had the car. So she just walked. So she placed a book at this house with my girlfriend's mother, and they were Catholic too. So her mother was not interested. And so I said that the lady of the house is busy and she can't come to the door. So the woman, her name is Frances. So Frances, she didn't want to take no for an answer. And so she began to ask me questions. She asked me what religion I was. And so I told her. And then she started asking me the questions that we all know what they are when we went door to door. And so I would say the answer, and I was very impressed with her. So she asked me about the Lord's Prayer. Did I pray that? And then she explained the Lord's Prayer. I stood there for an hour. And then I begged her to come to our house. And she said, "Oh, well, I don't know. Would your mother like that?" I said, "Oh, yeah, my mother would be real happy about it." I knew my mother, so, I knew her attitude. And so that evening around 6 o'clock, she came. And my mother and she recognized each other right away because this lady had been at our house, unbeknownst to me, leaving a Watchtower and Awake magazine every so often. But my mother wouldn't read it. She just threw it away. So anyhow, I was excited when I got home from my girlfriends, and I told my mother about what I talked about. So she was already, she was prepared, but we didn't know the woman was going to come that evening. So we sat and talked for quite a while, made arrangements for her to come back. I never asked what religion she was. I never knew what religion she was until for 3 months. I think we talked a little bit about this last time that I was on. But I developed my love for the Bible and the way that it was explained to me quite rapidly. So I went to lunch at Bethel with my mom, and Frances used to live in Brooklyn, right near Bethel, where we live now, and she lived around the corner from us. It was 30 miles to Brooklyn. So it was very exciting for me and my mother. And we had an interesting experience, though, at the time, which almost caused us not to become witnesses. And if you want me to go into it, I will right now, but it's a doozy.
Oh, yeah. We'll hold right off now, but we will get into that. But so let me just reiterate and bring the audience up to speed. So you were, would you say, around 13?
13.
How old were you when you really started connecting with the witnesses? Was it 13?
Well, I mean, it was fall, and I was 13.
Yeah.
So by the spring of when I was 14, 1954, I was just absolutely enamored with everything the woman told me. You know, my mother came from Europe, and my father, his parents came from Europe. They saw hard times. And my mother always had an attitude that life is futile. And she would always say it was just, you get old, you die. She just didn't see what the whole reason for life was. And she really wasn't that much of a believer in doctrinal things. She's a very good woman. My dad was a good man. So my father, he worked at Republic Aviation in Long Island. And he worked the third shift. So he wasn't there for our studies every Friday evening. My brother sat in on the studies, and but my father didn't mind because he wasn't interested in God. He saw too much in the Catholic Church when he was young, so he wasn't against it, and he wasn't for the Catholic Church. It just happened, and he was kind of concerned, though, about raising two teenagers even then. So he was very, very happy that we were studying the Bible because we didn't give him any difficulty at all in those years. And my mother was happy from what she was learning. So especially when Francis told us about, in the Bible, it spoke about Romans 8:20, where the creation was subjected to futility. That was a turning point for her when she realized, because she always thought life was futile. And so she saw that scripture and the way it's worded in the Bible, that God is going to remove that futility. Creation wouldn't last that way. But she didn't know that. She used to say it to me about the futility. So that scripture was very, very practical in our life. So by the time I was 14, in the fall of the year in October, Mother and I both got baptized.
So you got baptized at 14 years old in the Jehovah's Witness organization. So you were getting very close to that. Now, growing right up there in Long Island, and Frances, the woman that talked to you about the witnesses at first and bringing you to the Watchtower, you really got connected with these people and some of the higher officials to some degree too when you were younger. So this became kind of a real, wow, this is so exciting and this is so wonderful that you could now connect. And they were answering, when I talked to you the other day, some of the questions that they were answering for you, that the Catholic Church, you said you would ask them about certain things and they would not be able to answer that, but the witnesses could do that for you.
Well, we didn't believe in immortality of the human soul. I mean, we were Catholic, but we didn't believe it. Mom and Dad never talked about anything like that. They just, the Trinity too, that they wouldn't even discuss it. They were not interested in doctrine. And hellfire, no discussion at all. So I knew the beliefs. My girlfriends were Catholic, and but it was not part of our life at home. So the questions I wanted to have answered was right away. Was what's the name of your religion? Do you have a religion? Do you belong somewhere? I said to this lady, and she explained that they were representatives of the Watchtower. She was cautious about saying Jehovah's Witnesses. So I said, who's the Watchtower? I never heard of it. And except they showed me the magazine. I had never seen it before because, as I said, my mother would always throw it away. She couldn't understand it anyway when she'd look at it because it was just too much for her. She only went to second or third grade in Europe. But she taught herself fluent English when she came to this country. She didn't have much of an accent, and she worked. She was smart. She just didn't have an opportunity. The kids were taken out of school at second grade, third grade, and they worked. Everybody had to work. And so she had to pick the rocks out of the garden. That's what she said when she was only 2, 3, 4 years old. But they weren't against education, and I was looking forward to go to university. I'd been the first one in the family to go to university. I wanted to be an archaeologist. I was very interested in history, so that's the whole reason I think that I was so interested in the Bible. And I couldn't make my mind if I wanted to be an archaeologist or wanted to see that I was so interested in it. And so designer of women's clothes. I used to draw. I was always had a pen and a pencil in my hand and was drawing. And so we were an up-and-coming family. My dad had built us a lovely, lovely home. He was a jack of all trades. He was a crane operator. He was could fix anything. So we were all together quite a up-and-coming family, middle class, upper middle class. So the thing about us was the fact that we were at this threshold of making up our minds. I knew what I wanted to do, and my mother was okay with it. She never was as zealous as I was, but we didn't have the same personalities at all, which was great. You know, we complemented one another. So, and then when Francis took us to Bethel for lunch, because you could make that arrangement, and so I was 15, and I looked 20. I really looked older. My mother said I was born old, and I think she was right, because I certainly did look older. So we sat at a table of 10 for 10 people, and 8 of them were handsome young men who were working at the factory and were paying a lot of attention to me. And I was in seventh heaven at 15 years old. And then after the lunch was over and the food, they talked about the food coming from the farm upstate New York. They grew their own food. So that was impressive. I was eating corn on the cob as they grew up at the farm, trying to talk to all these 3 or 4 or 5 young, handsome men. And I was the only girl at the table. And so, and my teeth were getting full of corn on the cob. And I was so embarrassed. And I can remember that to this day, because you know how kids are. And for a young girl, it was traumatic to smile and know you had your teeth and your mouth is full of corn kernels. So you'd have thought that was the end of my life at the moment. I was so nervous, but that only began my nervousness.
Well, we can see that, I mean, from an early age, Barbara, from an early age, you really got connected to the witnesses, and I can understand that. You grew up there in Long Island, and Frances was a gung-ho witness, and she brought you to Bethel, and you got to meet all these people, so it came ingrained in your life. And I can see how you really, in
We
some of the
started to the meetings right away, and our congregation servant was an ex-Bethelite. That was, I mean, it was spiritual all the time. He was bringing them out from the headquarters to give talks at the hall. At least once a month, we had a Bethel speaker. I mean, I don't, it was like he died and went to heaven. My goodness, it was just so exciting. I had a purpose for life. The witness kids could get together at parties and dance. Nobody looked askance at that. And they dated. I dated young Bethelites. I was 16. As I said, I looked older. By the time we moved, I was 16. I had 2 marriage proposals because I looked older. And my brother, and I was so zealous. But the girls in the congregation, there were 8 other girls, and they were raised, except one, and they were raised in the witnesses, and they were not zealous. They were bored to death, and I was the opposite.
Well,
So,
you were getting the attention from you were young blonde, good-looking Polish woman,
right?
attractive. And so the Bethelites, they were like, oh, look at this beautiful blonde, right?
They're
So,
looking for zealous girlfriends, zealous, you know. And my
so-
brother used to have to say, she's only 16, because they asked me about me, you know. It was just circumstance. We had very pretty girls in the congregation, and everybody was gracious to me and delighted that a new family was coming in that was so zealous about the organization. We popped right out in field service. I started a Bible study with a woman, right? The first months in field service, I started studying with her. She was a Arthur Murray dance instructor, and she had a husband and child, and it was very exciting to teach her. Her husband was against it, though, and he threatened. He told her when he found out that she was studying with Jehovah's Witness, he told her to tell the woman or whoever was coming there, he said, you tell her that I'll kill her if she comes back. And so the gal, she tells me this, and I didn't blink an eye. I knew I'd come back in the resurrection anyway. That's how I was so into this. And I remember walking to her house the week after that, and I knew I was going to die, but it didn't bother me any because I had my hope. You know, everything fit. There was a reason for living. And when you don't have that reason and you're wanting reasons for everything, which young people do, and then they get involved in many things that take their life and they forget how they were when they were young, that they wanted all those questions answered. So we had men who came out from Bethel to speak.
Well, hold on one second. I don't want to get too far. I don't want to get too far ahead now. I want to be able to the audience. I want to keep our audience here. I want to get you walking through this in a nice, orderly fashion.
Well, let me tell about our dinner there at Bethel, because that's really a turning point there for my mother.
All right. Well, that's a turning point. But I just want to say one thing to the audience, that it's safe to say that when you were a young witness girl, you loved the organization. You were a good Jehovah's Witness. You were going out in service. You were doing all the things they wanted you to do. And now I want you to tell the audience, because I'll tell you what, this really was remarkable when you told me the other day, your mother and you were invited to Bethel for lunch. So tell us what happened there.
Well, after lunch was over, Francis told us that they're going to have a prayer at the end. You had one at the beginning of the meal, and we would have one at the end. So we were prepared. And so when it was Knorr, the president, Nathan Knorr, who closed, he sat at the head table, and there was a huge dining room, and there were about 200 people at Bethel at the time. So he he said, we will have prayer, but we are not dismissed. So then after it was over, he called the names of 7 young men and told them really to come up to the table and then stand next to it. There was a wall right there, and he lined them up against that wall, and he proceeded to tell them all off. And he was very, very harsh. And my mother was shocked, and I was too. I thought, I didn't understand this. I didn't understand how they could do this to people. But everybody was dumbfounded that was sitting there. Of course, those who were at Bethel for a while were accustomed to his tirades, but we had never seen anything like that. And it was many, many years later when I asked my mother, when I left the organization, and I asked her, why did she step in and prevent me from becoming so zealous in the witnesses? Because she said that that experience, it was over for her. She said, I was not going to have anything more to do with an organization that could do this. And he didn't curse or anything like that. He was just angry, and he kept spouting scriptures at them, and he demeaned them. And, you just take young men and do that too is awful. And everybody else was so embarrassed. And so she said to me that she was ready to leave the organization entirely. She didn't want any part of that. So I asked her years later, I said, why didn't you stop me then? She said, because I knew how much you loved it, and I thought you'd run away if I tried to stop you. And I said, no, I wouldn't have run away. She said, oh, yes, you would have. And she said, the witnesses would have taken you in. Francis would have taken you in. I knew that. And so she said, I let you do this because I was so afraid. And I thought about it later, and I thought, she's right. I would have, because that is how I was about this. I was so happy. The kids in school weren't as happy as I was with my life. I had something to do beside homework, and there was no idle time to do nothing. I didn't want to do nothing. I wanted to be involved. I was old beyond my years. If I could have gone to college when I was 13 or 14, I would have, if they'd have had me, because I was always wanting to be involved. And kids back then, there wasn't anything to be involved with, just homework and help clean or something at the house. And not like today. The kids are 6 months old and they're sitting before a little computer screen. So they gave me reason to live and a hope forever. And I was very, very disturbed by what I was seeing in the world. And my family came from Poland. My family had seen terrible things. And the Holocaust, all of the information on the Holocaust was terrible. I was only 7 years old when a man was sitting in our kitchen who was right after the war, and he was a colonel in the Polish army, and he had come from Poland to the United States for military reasons. He came to our house because he knew my mother's family in Poland. And he sat there and they talked for hours about how horrible it was for the family. Had no food. It was after the war. It was just a mess. And so there was no justice. And I saw the worst. I didn't participate in the worst. We had good food, good clothes, whatever. But there were so many problems. And the Bible solved them. The understanding of Genesis opening with the paradise and closing with the paradise showed me that there was a hope for a humanity.
Well, no, let's stop right there. Now you're doing a fine job. You're doing excellent here. People are getting the gist of it all. So I'm just going to kind of recap it, that you really found it very fascinating to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses, because they really showed you attention, Barbara.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
a lot of attention. Just adjusting my mic here. My mic is falling off the table here, so just give me a second to get it reworked here. I don't know why that happens, but it does happen. So just kind of bear with me. I'm tightening the mic up here. It's falling off the phone. But anyways, what I get here is you're telling the audience that you were fascinated by the witnesses for the things that they were teaching you. And you didn't get that from the Catholic Church, but the witnesses were giving it to you. So you kind of fell head over heels for these people at a very young age. And
Let me tell you, two of my girlfriends were molested by the Catholic priest. That was the horrible thing, and nothing was done about that. So I mean, I saw this kind of thing early on, and we walked to school together. The girls, both of them were latchkey kids. Their mother worked. There was no dad. Parents were divorced, and so they used to go over to the church. They had after school activities, and that's where they were. Both of them molested. So we lost hope, and people didn't know what to do about it. Even today, 91% of people do not report child abuse. If it's their own kids, they're ashamed. They don't want their neighbors to know. So many times it's a relative that does it. They don't want people to know. It was just exactly like that back then too. And
yeah, so in other words, so you saw the abuse, you saw the abuse in the Catholic Church, you connected with the witnesses, you got this really good feeling about them, and now all of a sudden they were the biggest thing you could possibly think about is the witnesses. Now, people are asking me right now, they're writing in on YouTube and asking questions. They want to know, so you're a good witness now, you're a young witness. And now, before we even go to what made you want to go to Bethel, let's talk about how you met. How did you meet your husband? That's what people are asking here too. So
okay,
how'd you meet Joe? Let's go into that.
my mother and father moved to Miami when I was 16, and there we established, it was Hialeah, actually, Hialeah, Florida. It was a nice congregation. And but living that close to Bethel, you're at the seat of the world headquarters back then, and everything was so exciting. And it wasn't in Hialeah, Florida. It was just a same old things. People were bored to death, and there was trouble. The kids were troublesome. Many of the boys were very rebellious, and all I remembered was these nice, clean-cut guys at headquarters, And so two sisters in the congregation, young women, and myself decided we wanted to go where the need was greater, so we put in for it, and we had an assignment. I was 17, and one of the girls was 19, the other was in her early 20s, and we were sent to Reform, Alabama, and the congregation was in Reform, Alabama. We lived in Columbus, Mississippi, right over the border. We couldn't get work. It's a university town, and the young people had all the part-time work. So our money lasted 3 months. So I didn't want to go back to Miami, and I wanted to go back to New York. So I called up Francis, and I had heard about the 1958 assembly that was going to be in the following year. And they were working on rooming to get, after all, it was one big convention at two big ballparks, Yankee Stadium and the Polo Grounds. 250,000 people were expected. So Frances said, come on up. She had a daughter of 2 years older than me. And she said, come and then you can find yourself a job or whatever. And that's what we did. The three of them went there. Three went there. And we went over to headquarters and put in our applications. And we worked at the factory. So that was a real joy to do. I had a picture. I don't have it right now. I would have sent it to you, but it's me in pre-assembly work with some of the people that they're long deceased, but mostly women who were doing the rooming. People were in the Bronx and Yonkers and Brooklyn were going out door to door looking for rooms for 250,000 people. It was at headquarters, you had to assign them rooms. So as the rooms were coming in, the addresses and names, we were assigning them according to the size of the family and all of that. So I found a job at Aetna Life Insurance, and the other two girls found work. So I had the car. My dad had given us a car when we went to Mississippi, and we were happy as could be. So there was a woman in the congregation the year I was gone from Hempstead congregation. That was at the time in the 50s. The largest congregation at the time was in Jamaica, right? Jamaica, if anybody familiar, I know, they'll know that that's a very urban area by New York City. And the next big congregation in Long Island was Hempstead. And then as you went out to the end of the island, there were hardly any congregations. And so the Hempstead congregation was very active. And this woman moved in from Dallas, Texas. So she is the one who introduced me to her son. And I didn't know she had a son. She was just very nice to me and told me she was having a get together. She called it a party at her house on a certain weekend, on a Saturday. And she invited me and the other two girls and a few others from the girls from the congregation. And so we were very excited about it. And she said she was going to have some boys. They called them, we're going to have boys from Bethel. So that was interesting. And then I figured it out after something she said, and I realized that she had a son in Bethel. She didn't say at that time. And then I started putting two and two together, and I thought, uh-oh, she's interested in her son meeting me. It was just the way I felt it. So I almost didn't go, but I decided, well, I can't disappoint her. She's so nice. And we went, and he came into the house from the back. He had the car, and he brought in 4 or 5 Bethelites with him. And so he was parking the car. They already came in, and we were introduced. And we were about five or six girls. And so it was very nice. And then I was sitting by the door to the kitchen in the living room, and I heard the screen door shut. And next thing I heard her say to him, "It's the blonde in the living room." And he said, "Mother, you know I'm not interested in any blonde. I got another year and a half to stay at Bethel." Well, he had signed up for 3 years back then. That's what it was. And so right away I thought, oh my goodness, hoity-toity, you know. And so anyway, he comes in the living room, and he introduces himself, and they put a record. This is the days they had records, and they put a record on, and we were dancing. Well, anyway, they put this record on. It was tango, and so we were. He asked the girls in the room, each one, if they could tango. He could, and I could, because the woman I studied with taught me how to ballroom dance. And so he got to me, and he asked me, could I tango? And I said, yeah. And so we tangoed. I had a new pair of shoes on, and the buckle on my shoe, and he did a crossover step. He hit my shoe, and the buckle broke off my new shoes. I bought them that morning. And so I told him years later that I made up my mind he was going to buy my shoes forever. What he did. And that's what he's been doing. And so he's very, very nice. He learned how to dance he came from Florida originally, but when he was 16, his family moved to Dallas, Texas. And he learned to dance because he had a sister. he was the oldest. He had two younger sisters, and one of them, they were in a school play, and they had to learn to do a dance, and it was a tango, and that's why. But he could do the other stuff too. So then it was a nice day. We went on to the week, and I was back at Bethel, and I saw him at Bethel. He was coming down in the big elevator. They had the truck size elevators, and it opened up when I was going up and he was going down. And he never said anything to me. He didn't even look my way. So I thought, well, he was a little snooty. And but then I got a phone call in the middle of the week, and he asked me to come to Bethel to a party in one of the Bethelites' room. And I asked him later on how come he didn't even acknowledge me when that elevator opened up. He said, "You were there?" And I said, "Yeah, I was standing right in there." He said, "Well, I didn't have my glasses on." So that's when I found out he was vain. He didn't want to wear his glasses. So anyhow, we were at a party. It was not big, but it was very nice in a Bethelite's room. And so we became a twosome quite early. And in the 1958 assembly, we were engaged. And so he had another year and a half to go, like I said, or less at that time. I was, like I say, very, very active. But I was also, I made a mistake. And we were walking from the Yankee Stadium over to the Polo Grounds between sessions, and there was an apostate. Of course, I didn't know what they were called, and it was an evil slave. He was standing outside the Yankee Stadium and he had tracts in his hands against the Watchtower. And as we were passing, he handed me one, and when I looked down and saw what it was, I stood there and I ripped it up in front of him. I slowly, methodically ripped it up in front of him and threw it in a trash can, and kept walking. And Joe said, "Why did you do that?" So I said, "Well, he was evil slave and against the witnesses." And he said, "That was very rude." He said, I don't agree with you doing a thing like that. I really embarrassed him. He helped me to learn to be kinder, and because he was extremely kind, and he always was everywhere we went. That's why we had a wonderful, wonderful life, even as a witness. But my husband was one of the major reasons that our life was the way it was. He was a wonderful servant and a wonderful elder. He took care of the friends. He was there for them. He was never selfish, and he would never say anything to hurt anybody's feelings. And so he took this young lady. He's 5 years older than I am, and he simmered me down. Is what he did.
Well, that's quite a story, Barbara. That's good. So that's how you met Joe. So that's good. People want to know that. They've been asking me about that. How did you meet Joe? But you guys really became quite the couple. But Joe left Bethel, and you guys settled in Tennessee. So tell us how that all happened.
Yeah, well, we were. My parents had moved to West Palm Beach from. My father got a job at Pratt & Whitney. Which, as I say, that was his avocation. He was an airplane. Was a rigger, and so on these giant cranes, that was how he worked. But we were in Long Island, and he was at Republic Aviation, and his partner was killed, and my father was hoisting the airplane engine up with the crane, and some of the cables broke, and his partner was down underneath, and it just absolutely was horrible. And so my father, he didn't want to stay there anymore. He kept seeing it over and over again. That's why we moved to Miami. So when he got the call for, because he had all the talents for working at such a place, and so he went to Pratt Whitney, and so they moved into West Palm Beach, and Mother started to go to the congregation there, and so 1959. Late 58, I came back to West Palm Beach because I was engaged to Joe, and we wanted to go into circuit work, and we were. So I bought a small trailer, and my girlfriend, she from the other two that were with me in New York. Well, one came back and went to Miami, but the other one came back with me to West Palm Beach. And so she rented the little trailer for me, and I stayed with my parents, which were next door. They had an acre of land, so they let the little trailer. It's 35 foot, 8 wide. And so she was paying me $45 a month rent, and I was paying $45 mortgage to the bank. So by the time Joe came, we had that to live in, and we started pioneering. It was one congregation in West Palm. Our circuit went all the way over to the Gulf Coast and up to Okeechobee, Lake Okeechobee. I mean, there weren't that many witnesses. We went all the way down to Miami. I worked at the pre-convention work all the time. I always, I did office work. And so at the pre-conventions, I was always doing typing and whatever. And I worked with men who were, and their wives that were running the conventions. They were at Bethel, and they were sent to run the conventions. So Joe would come to the conventions during that time, and while we were engaged. And so that's where we were married and started pioneering. We worked Palm Beach. A lot of the witnesses did not want to work Palm Beach. They were afraid. But you know, I came from such a exciting past, and so going door to door, I don't care the mansions or wherever. And so we took the territory out in Palm Beach. I talked at the John Kennedy's summer winter home there, and talked to his niece. And you just meet just about anybody going door to door. We had a court case at that time which the witnesses won because my mother got arrested in Palm Beach for going door to door. Police picked her up, and somebody reported. So these are beautiful mansions, and somebody reported to the police that these strangers were going from house to house. So I was at one house inside. So we had to get with the society, and then they had to go to court and show that according to the law, the past, that these constitutional cases that the Watchtower took all the way up to Supreme Court, we had freedom to preach, freedom to speech, freedom of worship. So then we had to carry a card to show who we were. One day, I had a very, very funny experience to me. I was at the door, I knocked at the door, and this man opened it up, and I told him who I was. And he says to me, "I just saw Nathan." And I said, "Nathan who?" See, I've got a Long Island accent. And this guy was from New York too. So we sounded like the same. And I said, "Nathan who?" He said, "Nathan, your boss." I said, "Nathan, my boss?" He said, "Nathan Noah. I was just with Nathan." I was dumbfounded. And so he says, "Would you step in?" Well, I saw there was a woman inside there, so I wasn't concerned. And he started telling me what happened. He said he was the two buildings that the society had purchased, the squid buildings. he was involved with that, the two Swift buildings. He's in the legal, something to do with the legal end of all of that. And he said, we just signed your organization, and Nathan was there. They just signed the papers. They bought the Squibb buildings. I was dumbfounded. And he was very, very nice. Anyway, I went off after that. He was nice, took the magazines. I couldn't wait to get home. And I called Joe and I said, you know what? I said, Society just bought the Squibb buildings. And he said, no, they didn't. I said, yes, they did. I just heard about it. I knew about the Squibb buildings being purchased before most of the Bethelites. They kept it a secret. Always do. Even when they did it years later when we were there, they never let the Bethel family know until they're finished with all the paperwork and then whatever, and then they make a big announcement. Well, they hadn't gotten that far to make the announcement. So my husband was the first one of the ordinary folk at Bethel to know they purchased this Squibb building. So that was my claim to fame. Yeah.
Wow, that was quite a building. I mean, that really brought the Watchtower to alive in New York.
Right.
But
The beautiful lobby, the beautiful. I worked at the Squibb building. You know, it's 35, 25, 30. 25 is where anybody listening who's been there had gone into the big lobby. That's the 25 building. That's the Squibb buildings. You crossed over a bridge on the 8th floor to the 30 building.
I know it well. I was there, Barbara, and I have to tell you something. There's got a lot of people still listening in. Now, what we're going to do before we even move to the next subject here, because we want to talk about how you went to Bethel, how you got the invitation. But before
I got a lot of years before I got there, you know.
All right. Well, before we do that, though, I just want to open up our lines. We have a lot of people listening in on our radio telephone line. So if you'd like to say hello to Barbara or ask her some questions, she's here. We're going to go into her connection with Bethel, how she went there next. But, you know, when she was a young girl, ask her some questions. I mean, she really fell head over heels for the Watchtower. And she really was connected with it coming from New York and what have you. So if you'd like to speak up and ask Barbara a question, we'd love to have you talk in. So go ahead, say hello to Barbara. You're on with us now. Go ahead.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Carrie. I'm in the suite. I just want to tell you that I was raised also Catholic, and the thing that got me also is that every time I asked, I was very religious, and every time I asked the question about a scripture or the Bible, and they would always tell me, always, every time, that it's a mystery.
That's right. That's what they told me. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. You remember that.
Oh, yeah. I forget to say it. That's exactly what they said.
I always felt that I had a calling, and I couldn't figure out, you know, I wanted to be a nun, and the nun discouraged me. She said, you wait until you go. I was in the 8th grade, and she said, you wait until you go to junior and then high school, and then if you still have the same calling, then you should go. Well, I got there, and, well, things changed quite quickly. But the long and short of it is that when I met the witnesses at, it was what, about 16, I met a witness boy, and, well, anyways, we ended up getting married, but besides that, I just lost my thought. I started studying, and I had my Catholic Douay version and their version on the floor, and I would compare each thing. So eventually I closed my Catholic Douay version, and then I studied with them. And then I said to myself, this is my calling. So I was really excited about it, and that was my little story.
Well, that's good. But did you go from the frying pan into the fire?
I certainly did. I would have been better off as a nun, I think.
Well,
and it's a darn good thing, because we're very modest in that. in that school. It was run by the nuns. It was wonderful education. It
Yes,
just
absolutely.
did not understand the Bible or whatever.
Their morality of the nuns was great. I mean, I can't speak for all the priests, but anyway, when I was 7 or 8 years old, I was walking. The public school let us out at Thursday afternoon early to go over to. As a Catholic, you remember this, to go over to the church to learn about the Catholic religion, because we were going to be have our first communion. And so another little Catholic girl and I walked together. It was only a few blocks to the church from the school. And there was a car parked on the side of the road, and a man was in it. And he rolled down the window and motioned for us to come over. And so the car was lower than as we were walking. And so I went like this to see what this was all about. And when I did that, I realized that he had exposed himself. So it wasn't a good experience. Anyway, he tried to get us, the other girl. My mother was very, very great about instructing me about how to live a little life and not get into trouble. So I was pulling away. The girl he was offering candy and stuff. She was going towards the car, and I pulled her away, and we ran. We ran to the church, and I told the nun, and she'd call the police. And the next day, the other girl and myself and our both set of parents had to go to the police station, and here we little 7-year-olds lined up by a lineup, through a glass to pick out the
Right.
Well, we couldn't do it, but I was always impressed by the nuns. And my father, he thought the nuns were terrible. When he was growing up, they beat his hands with rulers. And he had bad memories. I had good memories from the nuns. And
Well, Barbara, they controlled that school. Let me tell you. Yeah, they did use what they used to call Little Susie, and that was a brush, the hand brush,
yeah,
and take them into the cloakroom, which they used to call it, the coat room, and beat their butts. But the girls would get a hit on the knuckles. But let me tell you, it was the best education I ever got until I became a witness, and then my vocabulary and everything else, I loved it. I really did until years later. But anyways, it was wonderful talking to you. I don't want to hold the other callers up.
but that's because it's nice to talk to you, and I have fellow feeling with you. I grew up in the Catholic Church is the same everywhere. They have a set of rules, and you had to obey.
Oh
Yeah. But
yeah.
it was good for us.
I appreciated that other part of my world, and to compare it with Jehovah's Witnesses. But I thought I died and went to heaven when I started studying. I was so hungry for God. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
I got to tell you, though, I had a really difficult time when I was 16. Even though I was so gung-ho for the witnesses, somebody gave me a pamphlet, and I was reading it after school at home. I remember it so clearly, and I was at home. I was sitting on the floor petting the poodle or something, and I was reading this little pamphlet. The Catholic Church put out a pamphlet on the superior authorities, and Jehovah's Witnesses, have a very set rule on the subjection to the superior authorities. And during World War II, their belief was the superior authorities was Jesus Christ and Jehovah God. And the Catholic Church showed in the material that it wasn't. And it was literally the authorities. And so I read that over and over again. I got the Bible out. I could see that the church was right. but I couldn't give up the witnesses because I had too much invested in it. And I said, God is with the witnesses and they'll get it right one of these days. I came very close. I was unnerved. I can remember it like it was. I have this brain anyway that when I never forget things like that. And even though I'm so far away from those years, it's like it happened yesterday. I was shaken to the bone because I thought everything they taught, the witnesses taught, was perfect. But you know, the witnesses really had a terrible time over changing that. And that's when the Romanian witnesses left. And there was a real breach in the organization over the superior authorities. So, you know, they have over the years, they would interpret something one way because it fit. And I'll tell you exactly how. It's off the subject, but I think you all ought to know. As a researcher at headquarters, and even before that, I did learn this. And the reason that they lean towards this saying it was Jehovah and Jesus Christ is because of what the different leaders in different countries were requiring people to do. And if it had been the authorities, superior authorities, that were our literal governments, witnesses in different countries would have then had to do what their government said. And of course, you had World War II. That was the whole thing here. World War II and Italy and Germany and the different countries that were Nazis and fascists, and the witnesses would had to do what they were told, and the scripture would have implied that they had to do it. They weren't far enough along to come up with a different excuse. So to them, the scriptures was Jehovah and Jesus Christ, and then they didn't get into any problem. If this is the way I remember it, I could be a little off so many years, but the church was right. The Catholic Church, and this is
right. I'm going to mute myself so somebody else can come in and talk to you. It was my pleasure.
Mine too. Thank you.
Well, we got Barbara Anderson. We got Barbara Anderson. Go ahead. You want to say hello to Barbara? Go ahead. You're on with us.
Hello.
Did you have something to say to Barbara? You're on with us. If you want to say hello to Barbara, we got a number of people on the line here. Hit *6. Well, we're going to go to Barbara. The people are asking me here that they want to talk about you going to Bethel and how that all happened. So we know that we come up now. We know you're young when you were young, and how you grew up as a witness, and how you used to go to the Watchtower, and how you met Joe. And now people want to know, how is it that you actually got invited to Bethel? So why don't you give us that story, Barbara?
Well, I got, like I said, we wanted to go in the circuit work. So we were pioneering a year and a half or so. And I got pregnant. And so that ruined our plans. And so we raised a son. And we're over the many years, Joe pioneered. Whenever he could, I would work part-time, he would work part-time, but we didn't have a lot of expenses because my parents owned that acre, and we put a big mobile home on our side of it and put some rooms on it as big as the house. We loved it, and we didn't have expenses, and we could easily do what we did. One of the witnesses was a doctor in Palm Beach, and I worked for him part-time, and Joe studied with a man who was a plumber. Joe worked for Florida Power and Light, and so he quit the job to Pioneer after a few years. The first job he got, Air Products out by Pratt Whitney. I'm saying this because this is all important to me and to you when you hear other people's lives and what they give up. And so he got a job there, and and I was pregnant, so we had to have more money and whatever. they came out with a rule at Bethel. Joe was a servant at the congregation, a congregation servant. And they came out with this rule that you couldn't work for a place like Air Products. They provided, I don't know, I can't think of what it is, nitrogen or something to the military. So he quit. And I mean, it was a great job. If he'd have stayed all those years, he'd probably ended up president or something, you know, by the time he would have retired. Of course, that's a long time ago. But he was on the ground floor, and this company today is one of the biggest military providers of the whatever the gas was. So guess who took his job? The man who filled his job was from the Lake Worth congregation. It was another J.W. who didn't bother him to work for this company that provided to the military. See, Joe was just simply amazed. But back then, you know, you didn't get upset over it. You just went on. But Joe was studying with a man who was a jack of all trades, and he taught Joe plumbing. And so Joe could part-time work, and I did my thing. And so we raised our son like that. And I used to say, with my nice accent, New York accent, I say, because remember, I'm raised in Long Island. I'm raised amongst Italians, Poles, and Jews. And I could do the accents of all of the people. In fact, I go door to door, and I was a little Polish girl doing the hand gestures. I say, you know, God is gonna, you know, I had accents for everybody. And so I kidded with our kid, Lance, and I said, you know, the Jewish mothers say to their kid, when you grow up, you're going to be a doctor. And I say, when you grow up, you're going to be a Bethelite. And yes, he was. So when he was, they took him in at 19 when he grew up. But when he graduated from school, he went to Pioneer. And as soon as he was 19, he put his application in. When he went to Bethel, we went to visit him a year later, and that's a big story right there. But when we went to visit him, and Joe went in, our son was in the press room. When they put him in the press room, Joe was happy because Joe was in the press room in the 50s, and he loved it. And so when we went to visit him, we saw that our son had the same locker that his father had 23 years before, and showered in the same shower room and everything. What a coincidence. And so that was special, you know. So that year when we went to visit him, we were in the dining room. It was a Saturday. We were ready to leave. We stayed at Bethel for the family could stay a few days at Bethel if you got a kid there. Very few had kids there. That's, I mean, everybody's got a parent. But the thing is that very few parents were there with their kids. And so I was, we ate lunch on Saturday, and we were ready to depart and come back to Tennessee. We had moved to Tennessee I'm trying to think now, 1974. We moved to in the mountains of Tennessee. They needed a congregation, and we went there to start a congregation, and there were 40 of us from Florida that went. Started a congregation. It was, of all places, Dayton, Tennessee. That's where the famous Scopes trial was. We met before they built the Kingdom Hall there. We met in the courthouse where they had the Scopes trial. So built a nice Kingdom Hall, and we were there 2 years. We lived up on a mountain, and the Kingdom Hall was down in the valley. Shopping, groceries, everything was down in the valley, and we were up on a mountain area because we're renting a nice little house for $40, and it was a beautiful area. And so, but I was kind of stuck there because he'd take the car to go to work, and he worked in Crossville, Tennessee, a very, very lovely area, and he was working for a witness and as a plumber. The guy it was building houses. Joe was his plumber. I was stuck at home, and my mother and father had moved up there too. My father wasn't too happy because he's a city man, and he was raised in New York City. So we came over. We were there 2 years, and I couldn't go on recurring visits by myself. And if I did have the car, so we came over to where we should have come the first time, where we came to a wedding here. That was, we had a friend in West Palm, and we got invited to a wedding, their, I guess, nephew or something. And we met, because we met relatives of these people in West Palm, and they came from this area, Tullahoma, Tennessee. And so we came here for the wedding. Once we saw where the need was greater up in that other area, we went there to help out. But it wasn't for me, and too rural. I couldn't. I was a city girl too, so we came over here, and this is an area that was very cosmopolitan. They have Arnold Engineering Center here, AEDC. That only wind tunnel in the whole world was here during World War. It was still here. At one point, it was the only one. It had the largest inland army base in the world during World War II, right in this area. And all of that concentration camps here, all was converted to military stuff. There's a big air base. You have support plants. It's a very cosmopolitan. Service was wonderful here. What we
want to do now, we left off. You were just getting ready to tell us how you were going to Bethel. So
well, that's how we go. So we come over here. Our son goes to Bethel. We're here 6 years, and our son goes to Bethel. When he's 19. He goes to wonderful schools here. This is all an educational area, math and science and all that. All these engineers, you go door to door. It was just heaven for me. So our son's in Bethel a year, and one of the men here who converted to the Witnesses, he was a military man at one point, and he had never been to New York, and he came from Florida, I believe. So he and his wife wanted to go to New York. Said, "Let's go visit Lance." So that's what we did, and so that's 1982. And while we were there, on a Saturday, we're getting ready to leave. Joe sees his old overseer of the press room. And I mean, the guy isn't old, but to Joe, 23 years before, he was working for this guy in the press room. Max Larson was over the whole factory. Richard Wheelock was over the press room. And so Joe starts talking to Richard, and I'm talking to Richard's wife. And my sweet honey of a husband says, "Yeah," and Joe's 48 years old. And he says, "You don't need any old people here, do you?" And he was teasing. And Richard says, "What do you do?" And Joe says, "I'm a plumber." And he says, "Hold on, just stay here. Don't move." He goes over to the phone, on the wall, no cell phone. And he calls the service department to find out what Joe's been doing all these years. And he finds out that Joe's been a pioneer on and off, that he's assembly overseer, that he's this. And he comes back and he's absolutely convinced. And he says to Joe, I don't know any of this is going on. And when Richard went to the phone, I said to Joe, "What's this? We got to leave." No, he says, "Richard wants us to stay around. He's going to make a phone call." So he comes back and he tells Joe, he says, "You've got an appointment this afternoon with Max Larson and Don Underwood." Don Underwood was the overseer of the worldwide construction of Jehovah's Witnesses. That means branches, everything, everywhere in the world. And then Max Larson's over the factory. And so that's what we did. We had our interview. But before that, I said to Joe, "What's going on?" He says, "They're going to interview us to come to Bethel." I was thunderstruck, absolutely thunderstruck. I had a lot of things going in here in this area. I had been managing a store. I was doing accounting work. I worked for very interesting. I worked for a man who had a construction company, and Joe was his plumber. And so he hired me to do his office work, and he had a little company on the side, and he let me manage this little company. It was a fireside and patio shop, and we had to have money. We were starting, when we left Florida, we didn't have much because we were always so into this religion. We never made a lot of money, so this helped me in the future. And I tell my story, you're going to be a surprise. I'm surprised when I look back at what happened because of what happened here. Well, anyway, in the 81, construction went zoom like this all over. Well, the man we worked for, all his construction company went under. It drug at the fireside and patio shop was $1 million company. It was doing fabulous. All the debts from the construction company drug it under. Our jobs were over. So we go up to the bank comes, a banker comes to see Joe, and he says, we've worked with you and your wife with the banking and the companies and whatever. He says, we're going to set you up. You have your own fireside and patio shop. And Joe built fireplaces and that was our plan. So we go up to Bethel, and Joe says, they want us to come into Bethel. I said, my life, what am I going to do with my life? I have all this arranged. And we bought this old house. We had to fix it up. So anyway, it absolutely ruined our vacation. We came back and we were so muddled. We knew we wanted that, but we didn't know how it was all going to work. Anyway, my mother and father were living on this property. They had a home on this property. We had a home. They moved into our house, and my brother and his wife, my brother was ill. He had lupus, and he moved into my parents' place, and we were able to go to Bethel. And in June, 3-4 months later, in June of 82, we went to Bethel. That's how we got there. And we were simply amazed. And I fill out the paperwork at Bethel that gives you the card for your health and all that stuff. And I say, I can't be around chemicals. I can't. That's just the way it is. Industrial chemicals. And guess where they put me? I don't think they ever read the cards that people filled out. They put me in tape duplicating. And tape duplicating, we were making Bible tapes, industrial chemicals. A whole big room full of women, and one guy overseer of all these women. We were all excess baggage. They didn't know what to do with women at Bethel. I was 42 then, and it was the younger brides that came in. The few that came in, they were housekeepers, and so the big deal back then was these Bible tapes. So they didn't know what to do. I'm 3 months in there, and I'm getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and I don't know what to do. So we go up to assembly, and I was so sick at the assembly upstate New York, and so when we come back, I told Joe I had to have a change of job. He said, "Well, we need to go home." He said, "Because they don't change jobs here like that." He says, you come in, you got to do what they say. I said, because he lived a life. He knew what it was like. I said, I have to say it. I gotta tell somebody. Well, I did. And they put me in invoicing under the, I can't think of what the department was. Anyway, so I would be sitting and use the computers were just coming in. And I would put the form at the Kingdom Hall. When you order literature, you order a Bible, the guy marks it down, and whatever they're going to order, it's a form. They send that into New York, and then we sat at the computer, and all the time you just sat there and put the numbers. There was a number system that fit the book or the Bible. So you sat there and did that. I knew how to use the computer. I mean, the little machine. I can't think of what it's called. The number machine. So I could talk a Blue Streak always. So I could talk to people around me. There was a governing body wives were in there. So I got to know Lucille Henschel and Barr's wife. What they were doing was checking our work. So there's like 4 of us on doing what we were doing, putting the orders of literature orders into the machine. It would spit out the paperwork and everything, and they would check it. And so I had a year of that. Then I studied with a woman in West Palm Beach who eventually became a witness. I studied with her 6 or 7 months in West Palm Beach. She left. I never saw her again. She came to the meetings a few times. She disappeared. I didn't know this. And she went to New York and she became a witness in New York. Who would think? I'm at Bethel. I don't know. We were in Bethel 4 or 5 months. And my husband, he goes off at the end of it was the evening meal. You could sit anywhere. You don't have assigned seats in the evening. Or you could go to your room and eat. And so I'm a slow eater. And so after the prayer, I sat back down and ate. He went off to somewhere. And he comes back and he says, you know that little lady? And she was a tiny little lady. She was like 4'8" or something like that. He says, remember she came to the Kingdom Hall? And he said, she's here. And I said, Betty's here? He says, yeah, she's with her husband. She's married. And they're coming here to Bethel. They're going to be Bethelites. And I was floored because when I last saw her, she had a little boy and he had a bad physical problem. And so what happened to her, she moved to New York. Her husband was a drug addict and he died. And she was single and the little boy who had a disease died. And she was upstate New York working and she met an architect. And anyway, she marries this architect. They both he becomes a witness and she's already, after her drug husband died, she actually went to one of the Manhattan congregations where people like Don Adams went to. So she knew them before she ever went upstate New York. And Don Adams became the president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. So, so she meets this guy. He must have been. He was like 6'7" and she was like 4. I mean, that was what a combination. But they were a neat couple, and he put in for. They pioneered for a number of years. They built themselves a trimaran, and they were going. He was well off. And they built this trimaran, and they were in the Caribbean, going island to island. Some of the yearbooks from that time have their experiences. So he put in for Bethel, and he became he was the #1 only architect in engineering and construction and they were building. They were starting to build everywhere. So he told me. After we saw each other and we had a wonderful, I had to catch up on life and whatever. So I was in packing literature. I was doing odds and ends in invoicing and whatever, shipping. And so this guy, Alan, he tells me one day, he says, they're looking for somebody for engineering. He said, in construction, you have the background in it. He said, why don't you put in for it? And I always said, sure, I'd love to. So you don't change jobs on your own, but they wanted people with experience. They had enough people who had no experience they had to train, and they were building and they needed help with people with experience. So I went to see Don Underwood. And Don Underwood interviewed Joe and I when we first came. And Don Underwood had 5 children and raised them all up there in Wallkill, built the first big, humongous building the society had upstate New York, the dormitory up there. Raised his kids up there. He appreciated the fact that he and his wife and family were part of Bethel for so long. And our son was at Bethel, and he liked that. And he was responsible for us coming into Bethel and recommended us. So I told him my background that afternoon when I made an appointment. And he made arrangements, and I was transferred into engineering. 6 years I was in engineering. I became a researcher for them. It was a marvelous experience. Because my background here was accounting, I found out that they didn't have a decent accounting system at Bethel. They had the worst, awfulest bookkeeping system. It was old. I understood that. Now remember, this is 82, and I'm in engineering for a while, and I find out that I'm working with a guy comes in, and he's an architect. So I'm working with him, and he tells me one day, he says, I got to find out how in the world they count money in this place. He said, because I got to know how much it costs. When I design a building, he said, I got to know how much all the windows cost. I have to make decisions here. And I said, you don't know how anything about the cost of your buildings? He said, no. So I told him what I was doing here. I was doing cost accounting. And so I said, I would set him up cost accounting. So he had to get now my story is really like Rick says, I have things I've never talked about. And this is the way it was. They would have accountants come in and volunteer for a month, and they go into accounting back then. And one time we were sitting with an accountant at dinner, and he was there, volunteer for a month. And when he found out we had a family and we were here, he loosened up and he told me, he said, Jay, he said, they won't listen. He said, I try to set them up, and he said, they don't know what they're doing. They got the worst accounting system, but they don't want to change. I had heard that before in accounting. They were buying stuff not to wholesale. They were buying retail. They were purchasing. They had a little purchase department. Half of them didn't know what they were doing. And so I said, I'll set you up as something. We had to go through the governing body to get approval. And so the first thing I did is I called accounting, and I talked with a girl. The overseer in engineering was supposed to let them know that I was going to be calling and talking about accounting system separate from theirs. It would be an engineering accounting system. So I call up and I'm talking to this gal. I'm not going to mention her name. You'd recognize it. She was nice, but I find out later she had an illness, and so I can understand her reaction to me. So I said, I asked about the overhead, and I said, how do you keep track of overhead? We don't know what we're doing here. Money's you got to know when you're building what it's going to cost you. And she says, well, why are you asking me about our overhead? And so I said, well, I would like to know. She didn't, the guy was supposed to call and say I was going to call her. He forgot. She didn't know about me. She wondered what the world this woman is asking about overhead. So I explained, and then I said, how do you handle overhead? And she said, we don't. We throw everything in the bucket. Well, I was appalled. And anybody who's in accounting who's listening to me knows If you don't know what the overhead costs when you're building something, you're going to go under. You're building your everything. No wonder they were having money troubles back then. So next thing I know, I'm being called to a meeting. Who's there? Ha ha! The top guys. The one who was overseer of all of the U.S. building program, the overseer of that part of accounting. Lots of people here might know his name. He's still there. And overseers out of engineering. And they want to know how come this mix-up happened and all of that stuff. So, well, it was all explained away. And the poor old guy that was supposed to forewarn this woman that I'm calling, he apologizes and whatever. So get it all straightened out. So the next day I get a phone call from Gil Nazaroff. Gil Nazaroff was over the U.S. building program. And he said, I want to see you in my office. And so, fine. So I know that. Remember, I am not a child. I am not a young married bride. I'm married a long time when I'm there. I have worked. I worked most of my days, even when we pioneered part-time or even full-time at times. And I treated these people with respect. But they had to know that I knew what I was doing. And I didn't say anything, but it was obvious that they made a mistake. And I had actually permission from the governing body at this time for me to do this. They cleared it. The overseer of engineering cleared everything. And so you have a number of overseers, 150 in a department. You have overseers of mechanical, architectural, whatever. Everything's broken up into different areas. So, I had sit with him. He's still alive. He's in his 80s and he's in California. He has family by that name. And I know some of that family. They're out of the witnesses. I hope this doesn't make trouble for them, but it's been a long time that I've talked to any of them. And so we sit there and chat in his office. And this is what I wanted you to hear. He told me, because he recognizes that I'm experienced. And so he's picking my brain. And because they're not all that experienced at headquarters. You think maybe they should be, but the rule there is you become an overseer over a department you know nothing about. They mark you by your spirituality and not by your vocation. So you got a person who's over art that never picked up a pen, but he's very spiritual, and he's over all the artists who he's driving crazy. That is the way it was. So Gil's talking to me, and he says, I got to tell you, we got problems. I don't know what in the world sometimes is going on. He says, we're building branches in Europe. He said, we got big cranes, big machinery that we invest in. We move it from one country to another. He said, I can't tell you how many times the machinery disappears. We never see the crane again. That's the kind of thing that they were going through. Am I exaggerating? I don't know. I'm telling you what he told me, and he was disgusted. And the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. So when I said to them, I would design them a cost-effective. You buy it if you have a construction business. Unless you get an accountant on the outside, but many times you buy your own bookkeeping system and you have someone work in the office who works on it. But now everything's computer. So that's what I did. I made the same system. It cost $1,200 when I was here working for the construction company. And I set it up identical. And so they were able to find out how much it costs to build a building. And they started learning about this. But interestingly, what happened was with the government body's permission, they divided off engineering from accounting. I did everything. All the bills came to us that from the business end. We were running a business-like construction company. And after, I also became a, a, um, a researcher for them. When you want to build anything in that part of where Bethel was, that's a heritage area, history. You have to have everything that you build exactly like it when it was built in 1914. That's Buster was built in 1914. Every time we bought it, and that's the thing. They never told people. That was the reason they brought us in. They didn't tell the whole family they bought Bossert, and they had bought the towers, and they had bought this and that and whatever. And that's what they wanted Joe for. And that's why we got in so fast. And they wanted, and they expanded the engineering department and the construction. Like I said, it was 150 people. I did an environmental impact statement, the first one I ever did in my life, and loved every moment of it. I would go to the Long Island Historical Society during the day, or the libraries. I had to do research to see what 50 years before, 100 years before a building looked like. So I was really getting into the research. So when writing department, unbeknownst to everybody, they were going to do a history book, and they wanted a researcher. Well, they really wanted a man to do research, not a woman. But the governing body said, this is what the overseer told me. They said, no, we have too many women, and we don't know what to do with them, and we need the men for the heavy duty stuff. And so you're taking a woman. And so there was the guy by the name of Weisgarber. He was the one that put people in jobs. When we first went into Bethel, he was the one who, he tells you, you're going here, you're going there, you're going there. And anyway, what happened was we were going to build a 30-story building right there on overlooking the BQE. It's a highway, big highway, right on the East River. And it had to go through new zoning. So I had to change the zoning or something. And Koch was the mayor. And I did an environmental impact statement for this building. It had to be presented to the New York authorities. We got all that done, and then they had a big meeting, and the apostates showed up. I got to tell you, they really were good. Back then, I didn't think so. They showed up for this big meeting in Manhattan, and they got to Koch. They put information in their ears, wrote paperwork and all kinds of stuff to prove that Watchtower, don't change it. Don't put them over there. That we're this is a negative. Well, Koch turned on, and they would not approve the changing and building this big building. So it was a dormitory, a big dormitory. So they decided they'd put it over by the factories. That's a few blocks away. Well, I didn't have a job. I worked on an architectural group with the architecture group, so I didn't have anything to do. And until for our group, something else came up. So I was bored to tears because I loved to work. And so I went by Weisgarber's office one day, and I had heard in Bethel that some people do this. And I just said, well, I'll try it. So I go by his office. He's a nice man. And I said, I told him what happened. I don't have any work. And I hear that sometimes you lend people to other departments. And could you lend me out to another department until we have the new building to start on? And he said, yeah. So he assigns me to communications, and it's a little room. It's got all the electrical connections for all the phones and everything for the whole complex. And I had to put all that into a computer, and it was 55 degrees in that room. And I gave me an old chair to sit on. It was murder. Twice I got roses put on my seat by the young men who were in communications, who called me mom, and they knew our son, and they felt sorry for me. But I knew, don't complain, because you don't. Joe warned me ahead of time. Don't complain, and because it gets you nowhere, and they'll just get you marked. So I did my thing, and then I went back to my job after a month, and we still didn't have anything for me to do. So I go back to Weisgarver, and I said again. And a week later, the overseer of the department gets a phone call from Weisgarver and says I was to report to writing. And so I went to writing. And by that time, they knew my background. And I didn't know many people in writing at all. I saw them around, but I didn't know them well. We had 4,000 people at Bethel at that time in the complex. So Carl Adams of the three Adams boys, men, well, they were boys when I first met them. They were young men when I first met them, and from California, and they were, I guess, in their 20s. So this is years and years later, and Carl was manager over writing at one time. That's what they used the term manager, and he has the assignment to put the history book together. So he's the one that told me that about this later on, that he wanted a man to be a researcher for him. But they said, no, you have to take a woman. So what they did is they sent 4 housekeepers and me to be interviewed by him. Well, you know he's going to choose me, because the 4 housekeepers were young women who married a Bethelite. They had never been out of their parents' home before. They didn't know nothing about that kind of work. So he chose me, of course, and he told me. And they wanted me to take that job. And that's how I got into there. And many people want to know that was an extraordinary opportunity. And that's opens a whole new story. And do I ever have stories? If you think that I will run out of stories, you're mistaken, because there are plenty to tell. And I had wonderful times. I also had interesting and extraordinary experiences. And rather than write them down, I'm talking about it because I'm so sick of typing year in and year out all this stuff. So I decided to tell the stories. Good things, they're just people, just like me, with our assets and deficits. Overall, people in Bethel were very, very nice and very kind. There were exceptions to the rules, but that's the way it is everywhere. People are people. And if you acted as an adult, some of the kids came in to work at Bethel. 75% of all of Bethel was boys, young men. That's what they had to put up with. One of the men, who was George Couch, was over all the homes. He told Joe and I that even back then, now this is the 80s, I think he told us this about 84. He said, we never get an application where it says, have you ever been on drugs? He said, we never get an application from a young person who doesn't say, yes, he was on drugs. Even though they were witnesses, they experimented with drugs. So you see, rich people. And as you dealt with people, it was quite a remarkable experience. And I wouldn't throw that experience away. It made me what I am today. It broadened me out tremendously. And but I found out the sadness of this organization run by men who put their spirituality above anything else. And Consequently, the members got forgotten. And that's the problem, the members. And so the members ended up being mistreated. The children, the policies and practices protected the spiritual realm, always a spiritual realm. They didn't protect the people. They didn't do anything for the people, nada. And they still don't. You are if you're a witness, you do the work, you use your money, they do nothing for the workers. We are throwawayable. And if they like you and you work your way up and you get into that upper level, and your expertise is needed, then you have a place for yourself. But amongst 4,000 people, you have people that work underground, undercurrent. There's always something going on with imperfect people, and we're all that. So I talked a lot about this, but that's the idea here. That's why Rick has invited me to tell you and I try to be impartial. Please believe me, and tell you how it was. It's different now. You know why it's different? It's a different organization, entirely different. I would not make a statement about it today because I don't know it today. But they tried everything to get their act together, and it's because of what they did to people, shunning and child abuse, and it's their own fault that they are in the position they are now. And I can say that, and they've never mistreated me. I've never been harmed. I've never been. Nobody's ever threatened me from Bethel. Those men are dead now that I worked with, but I got to tell you, there's one there that I never met, did not know him. He's a governing body member. I wrote him. When they came out in the Bible and said in the New World Translation about mentally diseased, I wrote an open letter and I had it sent to him personally. It was delivered to his desk. I put it out on the internet. And you know what? I made a presentation. He knew who I was. After all, when I was in the writing department, I made discoveries of this organization that they never knew about. Never. They never looked. I'm nosy. I'm not nosy about people. I'm nosy about other stuff, information, history. And I learned, and they know it. And they know I never gave them a day's trouble, not one day's. We had recommendations. The things that they wrote to us, the letters we got when we left from people, because we were adults, we were mature. We didn't go through the growing period. We weren't kids. And we already learned how to get along with people. And we were sincere. We made mistakes, but we were sincere. And so I'll continue another time, and I'll tell you some of the experiences that were from the writing department. But I know, like I got to tell you, somebody called me today and said they wrote a letter 2 weeks ago to, it's a huge, I'm not into the sports, shoes. This past week, there was a fella in a basketball team. I don't follow all this. I just heard about it. Irving, I think his last name was. He said some really ooky things about Jews. And he's black. But he said some pretty nasty stuff about Jews, and he's really paying for it. They relieved him of his job and whatever. And I was told that this man, he said, I wrote a letter because the guy had some kind of a deal with a shoe company, sports shoe, whatever those are called. And he said, I wrote that. And I told him, because this guy's a Jew. And he said, he's the ex-witness, he's a Jew. And he said, I wrote him, I told him. said, you can't let this go on. You can't let someone say this because of the Holocaust, or because of this and that. So what? Like 2 weeks later, the guy got his walking papers. He lost an $11 million contract with the shoe company. But a man wrote a letter. Well, that's what I did. It works. It really works. Send a letter. Send it personally. There's somebody that reads it. And I gave a recommendation just recently to an attorney about someone at Bethel who was at Bethel. And I said, talk to him. He'll talk to you. You see, we all have some clout. We all can do something. But most of us think we're helpless. That's not so.
Well, Barbara, we all can do something. I mean, we get a lot of people still listening into you here tonight, and it's really amazing. I'm glad you're able to go on and tell us all. Well, that's good. I mean, we're listening here intently, and I want to get your footprints here on the 6 screens and talk about your trek at Bethel. But, I did share with the audience in a little promo and what have you that there's a couple of things that I talked to you about that was shocking, that really were shocking. And it shocked me when you talked about it. So, we got about probably 10 minutes left here on our program. I want people to just come to grips with something this week you told me that really got me thinking. You talked. So, we've got to hold on one second. We've got some echoing going on here. Listen, folks, let me just make sure we got a lot of people trying to call in here tonight. So just hang in here, folks. We'll get you on here soon. You can talk to Barbara. But in the meantime, don't unmute yourself right now. It could echo. But Barbara, what I wanted to say is the thing that really rocked my boat this week is when you were working in the writing department and you were doing research on the Trinity. Could you just kind of reiterate what you told me this week about when you went and talked to this brother that was very knowledgeable? I think the audience should hear that.
Well, it's a longer, you can't take it out of context. I had the assignment every Thursday. I got my assignment from Carl Adams on what to research for the week for the Proclaimers book. And, here we go, like this. The opening of the Proclaimers book is actually of mine from my research. There's chapters in here I worked on. Well, Carl gave me an assignment, and the assignment was this. And like I said, you have to see the whole context to understand why even the Trinity came up. So he said, and listen, I really, really have been working for years and years on the history of this organization. And they started me off there. And I have continued since. So I know the history. I've probably read everything Russell ever wrote, sorry to say. I mean, it's very interesting, but boring after a while, 55,000 pages. So he said, okay, it's called the channel. You all know about the channel that God has, so says Russell. And of course, he's inherited through the Second Adventists, all the way from the Millerite movement. And that's a belief in a channel that when Jesus died, there always was someone on this earth that was wheat. There's a wheat and the weeds class. And it's Matthew 13, okay? They will grow together, the wheat and the weeds, until that I've got it in front of me because this is what I worked on, and it's on page 44 in the Proclaimers book. Let both grow together until the harvest. So you have the word channel through from Jesus to Russell. That's what the research was about. Is it true? Can you prove that Jehovah had, these are Carl's words, a channel until the harvest, the wheat class? And he said, now you got four I have to do this right. You got 4 requirements here that somebody who's a part of that channel that Joe was using to bring true Christianity to all the way up to Russell's day. No Trinity, no immortality, the whole soul, no hellfire. And they have to believe in the ransom. Now, there's the hard one right there. So they went all out for this. So books came from everywhere. We had one man that was a support person, and he was would get the stuff what we needed. He coming from England, from Oxford. It was just marvelous, and I had this wonderful opportunity to read all this in English because I don't speak any other language. And so I had to look at all of these people that were supposedly faithful, you know, the martyrs all throughout Christianity, these martyrs that died, all the different things that happened. And you know what? You could find some people that believed in no Trinity, and that, for instance, you had the Unitarians, Socinians. They didn't believe in no original sin or no Trinity. See, so could they go on the list? Well, no. Some things were like that Russell believed, and they say primitive Christianity. Everybody was trying to seek out who was in the theological world of searching who the truth. You go back and you go through this, and you look at all these people, and there were all these people who died burned at the stake and whatever. I looked at everybody, and you could find some that didn't believe in the Trinity and didn't believe in hellfire, but they believed in the immortal soul. There's always something. Sometimes you found very rare, in fact, it was like a next to nobody. They didn't believe in all 3 of those. But there was the ransom. There wasn't anybody that believed in a ransom. And that's a definition, a very special definition. Most Jehovah's Witnesses today, only the old timers kind of understood, but they're all gone now. It's never talked about now. The difference between this ransom and substitution, atonement, all that. But the ransom is very specific. And I couldn't find anybody that fit that, what was required. All 4 would be of the weak class. And so and I presented all my evidence. 6 months I worked on this. Something came up with the Trinity, and it was to do with John 1:1, and that is what he's talking about. Rick was surprised. Well, I was surprised too. So I found something about John 1:1 that I didn't know. Well, you know, John 1:1, the word talks about the word was, we get moving into the word was a.
Oh, hold on 1 second, Barbara, before we move on here. Well, what happens is our phone line gets cut off, but we want to hear this, so just stay with us. We're going to dial back in so people can hear on the telephone line. Every 6 hours, the phone line goes out, so just bear with us for a second. This is really fascinating. I want people to hear what you have to say about this because I think it's going to rock their boat. So just give us a second here. Give us about a minute. We'll bring the phone line back in. Okay. Well, we're really enjoying everything that's going on here tonight, Bob. You're really
Welcome into the live
you're really
six-screen
spilling the
conference
beans.
call.
We're just going to get the people back on our conference call line
To speak up and talk,
so we can get
press
them to talk to you.
*6 on
But
your
it's just
telephone.
amazing. You're really
When you are
spilling the
done
beans
talking,
on the
press
Watchtower
*6
tonight.
to
We
mute
really
yourself.
appreciate it. We really
Remember,
see where
when
you're
you
coming
are
from. Boy, I
unmuted,
see you're
your
very
phone is a microphone
energetic. I
and
see you're
picks
very
up on all voices in the
enthusiastic tonight.
background.
That's
We hope you
wonderful.
enjoy
You're
the
looking
program
good.
tonight.
You're
Will now
you're
be
really
placed
giving
into the
information
conference.
here tonight that we'd love to hear.
You are the
Thank
host.
you.
Press star now. Otherwise, please wait.
Okay, we're going into the conference right now, so just give it a couple of seconds. We'll be right back in. All right, I think we're back on. So let's do that, Barbara. Let's continue on with your conversation. I like what you had to say.
But they're not on my end on the telephone.
I'm sorry, Randy.
Yeah, it cut off on the telephone.
Can you guys hear me now?
Here, ready to go into the green room.
You all set? Pasta babe, can you guys hear me?
Love them.
Can you hear me? Pasta babe, can you hear me? Hold on. Just hold on one second, Barbara. Just getting the phone.
No problem.
We're just getting the phone line set up here. It takes a little time to get this set up, so let's see what's going on here.
They asked him why he did that. You know what he told them?
I'm not sure why that's doing that.
No.
All right, just give us a second. Pasta babe, can you hear me? All right, let's go back to where we are here. All right. Yeah, the phone line goes off, Barbara, every 6 hours.
And it said that it ended at like 3 hours and something. So I've never gone into a studio that says it ended.
All right, so let's we're going to just kind of disconnect the phone line right now, and hold on
I'm at the end of the one that Barbara was just on. So it ended at 3 hours and 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to leave.
All right.
Hello, Linda. Can you hear me?
I know he was watching because he told her she.
All right. Well, Barbara, let's just give it one more second here. We're so glad you're on with us tonight. Take a little bit of a break. We don't have any breaks here, so we have to kind of get this organized. I'm not sure what's going off the phone line, but I want the phone line open. So just give us a few seconds here. Boy, I'll tell you what, though, Barbara, you're really spilling the beans tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining in. To speak up and talk, press.
Stay with us on YouTube. We're just getting the phone lines reconnected here. They go off every 6 hours, so
remember when
we've been going on here for a while, so just stay with us.
And picks up on all noises in the background. We hope you enjoy the programs tonight. You will now be placed into the conference.
If you are the host, please enter.
All right, we should be able to get this settled now.
70
Get people.
participants in the conference.
All right.
It's 2 hours.
This brother that's in the that was in the writing department there.
Linda, can you hello? Can you hear me, Linda? Randy?
I'm here.
Yeah, just kind of stop talking for the time being. We got Barbara coming back on again, so let's just kind of hold off on you talking in here, and we'll bring Barbara back on. Barbara, let's go back to. I really wanted to I wanted people. I think it's on now, Susan. I wanted people to know what was going on. So go ahead, Barbara, and talk to us about what was happening with the Trinity.
Okay. So John 1:1, the article A, the word was a God is what the New World Translation says. Well, a number of translations do that, but generally speaking, it's the King James word was God. And so there were books that I was reading, and I got to tell you, I can't recall exactly what came up at the time that I needed to have an answer. There was a fella in the writing department. He was a missionary at one time, and he was an English guy, and he studied while he was in his missionary assignment Hebrew and Greek. So he was the only one at Bethel that could do the Bible, read the Bible Greek and the Bible Hebrew. And there's a common, especially the common Greek coin. But he was the one you went to. Oh, it wasn't Freddie Franz, as we discussed the last time I was on here. He didn't know beans about language. He just pretended he did. This man did. I made an appointment. I called him up, and I did that. I never just walked in at Bethel. I tried to make it like on the outside. So I made an appointment with him. So I go in, and I tell him about this, whatever I was reading. It's too many years to know. And beside that, I continued working for a long time on other things. So you just moved on. And, but I said to him about John 1:1. And my question was, is the New World Translation correct? The Bible team translators, is it correct on John 1:1? And the article A, he was a God and not God. And which to me, that was the Trinity. That's what they were using, that as a Trinity. Now, I got to tell you, I've done research on this since I've long ago worked with that, but I have looked at it. There's a lot of information on that. I'm not going to go into any of it here because I'm not preaching a message. I'm telling you about what happened. And my opinion on doctrines and the Bible, I don't get into that. It's your business to make a decision on what you want to believe. It's not me to push you into it in any way, shape, or form. But what happened here was, so I said to him, I said, is the way the New World Translation rendered a God, is that correct? And he said it was not correct. And I said, are you telling me that the word was God, like the Trinity? And he said, yes. Well, I was so thunderstruck because I lived and breathed the witness stuff. I did. And I didn't know what to say. And I'm not exaggerating. I didn't know what to say. I said to him, the only thing I could think of, I said, does the governing body know this? And he said, now remember, this is the old governing body. They're all deceased except Loesch. And he wasn't a governing body then either. So I said, do they know? He said, yes. I said, my next genius question was, are they going to do something about this? And he said, yes, probably in the future. I didn't know what else to say. I was in no position to argue with the man one way or another. I wasn't a scholar, a theological scholar on the Greek. And so I just stood up and I said, thank you. I walked out the door. And when I got outside the door, there was a wall right near there. And I stood against the wall. I was just trembling all over. I was just so dumbfounded. I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't tell anybody. I don't want to make trouble. And, this is an established religion. And I just took it. Would I do that again? I probably would. I've always felt that you have a right to believe what you want to believe. You just don't have a right to force other people to believe what you believe. And that's constitutional. That's legal. So I appreciated it. I believed what I wanted to believe. Nobody interfered with me when I was a Catholic and when I was a Jehovah's Witness. So these people were, as far as I was concerned, I was low on the totem pole. I was just a woman who was doing work. He was a scholar, and he said that. So I left it alone, and I went on to the other things to do.
Well, Barbara, I'll tell you what, Barbara, that's really getting a lot of buzz here on YouTube. People are commenting like crazy.
But I haven't finished. Let me just add that one thing about it. The channel, the question was about the channel. We never found a soul that believed in all the four requirements to be the channel. And in that Proclaimer's book, it says, and this is Carl. This is how Carl Adams got around this. And he discusses the wheat and the weeds growing in the great apostasy apostasy that developed after the death of the apostles, and the weeds predominated for centuries. What about the wheat? Who were among the sons of the kingdom during the centuries-long apostasy? We cannot say for a certainty, he says. And then he talks about the literal weeds and all kinds of stuff. Then he goes on, he says, nevertheless, Jesus said, let both grow together until the harvest. True Christianity then was never completely stamped out. Then he mentions the different people, William Tyndale, John Wycliffe, and different countries, and they who believed in rejected the Trinity, who accepted the Trinity, and they left it at that. Well, for years they didn't use the word. I've done the research. They stopped using the word channel. When I went back to take a second look at the past few years, I don't know, maybe 15 years, they started to bring it back again. They don't know the history. They stopped using the Proclaimer's Book. They don't sell it anymore. There's things in here they don't like that were put in this, and that was one of them. And so they started putting that back, and so they're back to being part of the channel to Russell. But I think they've dismissed Russell too. Remember, they say up to 1919, when the faithful slave, all they change. That's the other name for the Watchtower. So there.
Well, there you go. I mean, we got a lot of people, really, a lot of buzz around that. People are really, could you just kind of reiterate the man's name?
No, I never give his name.
Okay, so they were asking, but that's okay. But
I really shouldn't do that because it was a job, and I feel that he's not here to defend himself. He could be deceased too. That's 30 years ago, and he was probably in his 50s at the time. I've got other stories about other people that are going to surprise everybody, and I won't give the names.
Well, we're going to, in fact, when I come on in 2 weeks, Barbara, I mentioned this, and that was a shocking story about the Trinity, really. It really, really was. And thank you for sharing that with us. Now, when you come on in the future, we're going to also talk, we won't mention the name tonight, but next time you come on in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about President Noor, and we're going to talk about the man that jumped out of the building, kind of connected to what Noor did to him. We won't mention it.
Not why he jumped out of the building. He jumped out of the building from grief, but it had nothing to do because the other part of the story was 20 years before that.
All right. Well, when you come on next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about that man, because a lot of people, they don't have the whole story.
They don't. Somebody the other day and asked me about that. Said, the man who jumped out of the building, did he jump out because of child abuse? See?
Yeah.
It was nothing to do with child abuse, but what it has to do with is how it affected other people's lives. The decision made by Noor, which you all are going to be surprised, because when I found this out, I was very surprised. And it even affected our son's life. And some of the others, banker of the society, he actually had to leave Bethel. He was there when my husband was there in the 50s. This man was in the press room with my husband. He stayed, he married somebody, and here he was in the 80s, the society's banker. They had 9 banks, by the way. And so it affected his life so that he had to leave Bethel. And as a man in his 60s at that time, or 70, he had to find a job.
Well,
what happened with Noor was 40 years before that.
Well, it's really creating a buzz, so that's going to be coming up next week. But before we cut you loose, we're just going to open the lines up and see if we can't get some people who have been kind of pent up here. If you want to come in and just say hello to Barbara, she's on here with us tonight live. So why don't you speak up, hit *6, and come on right now and say hello to Barbara. She's with us. Go ahead.
Hi, Barbara. This is Brad from Australia, also Bob Roberts from the YouTube. And I was just wondering, what did you get paid for all of this work that you were doing?
The Lord has blessed me. Uh, we got $80 a month when we first went in. So he made 80, I made 80. So yeah, it was 160. And then by the time we left, we were getting 100. But we only needed it for expenses. They provided everything, and they gave you an allowance. The more years you pioneered, and you went in, you had what they call seniority. And so you got more money the longer you were there. So some of the ones who were there 40 years, at the end of the year, they were bringing in a few $1,000s as a gift. It's called a clothing allowance. I know when we left, we got a clothing.
So if everything's provided, how do you buy clothes and things with $80 per month?
Well, we had a donated place at Bethel, and the friends were always donating clothes. And so after work, we'd go over if we wanted anything, and we'd go in there. They had people sorting clothes, and sometimes you really get some beautiful stuff, you know. Sometimes you get some really neat jewelry that people gave to the
Oh, well.
You know,
Jewelry too. Wow.
Yeah. It was big time. I used to walk home after work. I'd pass donated and go in and go through what they hung out that day. It was really very nicely done, you know, clean too. And I go home sometimes carrying a bunch of clothes. They'd try it on at home, and if it didn't fit, put it out there where they had hangers and stuff near the elevators. And most times the best clothes you got was donated to you at the Kingdom Hall, and they'd say, take this to Bethel and hang it up at Bethel for somebody will fit, you know. So in the evening, a lot of the Bethelites, especially the young men, they would check out there by the elevator, see what's hanging there. Joe has a leather jacket to this day. It was absolutely beautiful. It's just like brand new, and he still wears it. And that was hung out there from somebody in the congregation that gave a Bethelite and said, take it and hang it there. We were in rags, that's for sure. Sometimes you go to the congregation and they took you out and brought you a suit. That wasn't unusual. So,
wow.
Our needs were filled.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Barbara, can we ask you about the Trinity? I mean, I'm sorry, I was waiting all night to hear. You said you talked to a high-ranking person at Bethel. He was a Bible scholar, obviously a very learned man, according to what I picked up from what you said. You said he had been a missionary. You asked him about John 1:1 and if the governing body believed that it was supposed to be the word was a God or the word was God. And he told you that the governing body knew that the New World Translation of John 1:1 was incorrect. They were wrong, and they knew it. Is that correct?
They knew it. But, you know, they have a problem, too. The governing body has it today. They have it back then. They argue amongst themselves. They don't like to change. They're afraid of one another. I can give you experiences to show you that they do. That they are there, and so I'll save that for another time about how they argue amongst themselves. Franz tells you that, right? Franz in Crisis of Conscience, he touches on this. It isn't all hunky dory about these men, and it sure isn't over even belief. And that is absolutely a fact, because Schroeder one time, they were going to change the date from 1914 to Return of Christ to 1956. And Schroeder said, it's a house of cards we built, he said. Ask others, they've heard it. It's well known. He said, it's a house of cards. If we pull out 1914, it all comes down on our heads. I'm telling you.
Wow.
Of much scholastic dishonesty in the name of God. Because they're human and they're organization first. They do not put anything else first, but that they equate spirituality like a business, like I don't know what else to call it, but it's just the way it is. It is to this day. If you ask any ex-Bethelite that's been way up there, in different departments, how they observe and watch, and keep your mouth shut. They know better than you think. Well, they don't know better than you.
So they admit that they're not inspired. They admit Jehovah is not God's name. And this man admitted to you that the governing body knows that the Trinity is a biblical fact and that John 1:1 in the New World Translation is a mistranslation. That is a huge thing.
No, there I'm going to stop you because I thought about that when I knew I was going to tell this. I'm not saying that they know that the Trinity is correct, because you got to go and look at the Trinity. There's all kinds of Trinities, and that's a whole different discussion. I had to study this in, and this is what happened with Servetus, why he was burned at the stake. And he didn't believe in one Trinity, he believed in another kind of Trinity, and he was cooked at the stake for it. So yes, he didn't believe in the Trinity, but he believed in another kind of Trinity. It's all historic. You do the research. I've written on this, some of this stuff. That's why I won't get into John 1:1 and say they're going to believe in the Trinity. Which Trinity? Which Trinity? Once you do the research, everybody who wants to be supposedly doing what they think God wants you to do needs to do some research. But others don't care. They just believe what they want to. They have that right to. I'm going to say this to you. Big winds come from empty caves. That's what Watchtower is.
Very good.
Go ahead, Jack. You're on with us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, hi, Barbara. It was nice to hear your presentation tonight. I got to be nosy just about some of the names you mentioned. You mentioned the brother, I'll just say his first name, Gil.
Nazaroff. Yeah, I don't mind mentioning. He was
Nazaroff. I got to ask, how is his wife, Hazel?
She's dead. She died a
Oh,
year and a half ago, I think, 2. Time flies, you know.
my goodness.
Yeah.
She was the nicest person.
She was, yes.
She was this person who one brother and I were talking, and he said, "Oh, she's so nice. You don't exactly want her to be your mother because your mother has to discipline you." He said, "You'd want her to be your favorite aunt." She was the voice of the Watchtower because she's the one who would answer when they used to say Watchtower. She's the one who would answer the phone and say, "Watchtower." You mentioned the 30-story building. And I can remember, I was there, I talked to you last week, I was there mid to late 80s. The 30-story building, did you say was 30 stories, that they wanted to build right there where it was overlooking the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway?
Yes, and right next door to the third, you had the 25 building, which was the one that faced up, looking up on Columbia Heights. Then you had, that's where the lobby was. Then you had the connected one that was 30. And then you had the building, it was a brick small building. We used to use that door when we'd come out, shortcut. Next to it, they owned that property. And that's where they were going to put the 30-story. And they couldn't get it.
You know, I was against that when I heard about it. I don't know if I was even still at Bethel. I was against it because of for this reason. To put it there, all the people, all the heavies, can I call them?
Yes, that's what we called them.
They would be living there. A lot of them would be able to stay there, and it would be so convenient for them. But the brothers who worked at the factory, they had to go. They had to move as quickly as they could to get to work on time. They often, some of them lived in the Bossard. So if you're eating in 124 Towers, you can't go back to your room after lunch to drop something off or pick something up. So where they ended up putting it, right next to the factory.
You know what it is today? It's for the state, it's the city or the state. It's for people who don't have any money. That's for your low income people. The 30-story. Yeah, there's a wonderful arrangement for low income people. And
what it is today? You're saying now that they've moved out of Brooklyn?
yeah.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
And
Okay.
one of the reasons they defeated it,
Hello.
is because it blocked the view of Brooklyn Heights. That was a major reason nobody wanted it there, because the view was fantastic. There was benches to sit on, and overlooked all of that. And but all of that is changing, because the Brooklyn, that expressway is falling apart, and they don't know what to do. So I mean, it's going to be billions of dollars to put this thing back
Well, Barbara,
together.
thanks so much for all the updates, and I always like hearing you talk because you always stick to what you know. I believe what you're saying, and
Why would I lie? Why? I'm not a celebrity. I don't care about people knowing me or being anybody. That's not the reason. We carry the same baggage, all of us, and to be happy. And I'm really an old lady now, and I don't have a long time on this earth. I would like to see others who are coming after me that have a handle on this, that what they are today is a happy person, that the religion didn't ruin their life. I have 4 people in 1 year that have committed suicide that were witnesses. And in my life, it's so sad. And I want people to, there's a difference between truth and facts. They manipulated truth. You can, but you can't manipulate facts. And these are part of the facts that I learned, but I didn't leave it over that. I left it over child abuse. I did. I was willing to die in Armageddon if God was going to kill me, but I could not. I had said that the last time. I'll say it till my death. Because the Bible said, I took the Bible literally, and I took the way the Watchtower interpreted, because I wanted it that way. I wanted God to bring an end to this unfair world, and I wanted to see a better world. I never thought it through because I was too busy as a performer for the Watchtower. A performer, that's all it is. We performed. You can't be a witness unless you do your performance, and that's what they want you to do. But they said it was scriptural. They thought it was, and that's how they read between the lines in the Bible. And I don't fault them if that's what they want to believe, but they hurt. There's so many people that are so hurt, and so many young people that are struggling because of this. So I don't have anything to gain. I don't ask for money. I don't care about that. We're fine. I care about people to have happiness. I had a great life. I really did. I mean, we traveled. We went to Europe. I spoke at the Vatican. Who could be a little Polish girl to get to speak at the Vatican? It's because I was an ex-witness, and I turned against the church over child abuse, which is what the Vatican was dealing with, child abuse. So I got asked to come and speak at the Vatican. You can't make this stuff up. It was an adventure, and I was nervous wreck, and I gave Rick pictures. He has pictures. He's got all kinds of pictures I sent him, and he got me one at a big Catholic church talking to people about this. And what can I say? It was a great experience, but at the same time, it was horrible. When you know this, and child abuse, and I always had to worry, maybe nobody's going to believe me. I left Bethel because I was afraid that when Jairus would find out that I was responsible for that package that went to all the governing body, he would figure out a way to get me disfellowshipped. And then nobody would believe me.
You said Jared?
Yes. Jairus was the key man behind keeping this whole thing quiet. Absolutely. And I could talk on that too. I have lots to say about that man. And so why can't I talk about it? Why can't I let others know? If you want to believe it, if you want to be a JW and believe what they believe, that's okay. But don't harm. And they have done so much harm.
Well, you're absolutely right, Barbara. Now, we're going to get into more of this stuff in the next 2 weeks when you come on. But we do have 1 or 2 more callers, and then we're going to cut you loose here tonight. My goodness, you're doing a great job. You're hanging in there with us. Who'd like to say hello to Barbara? Go ahead.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Barbara.
Hello there. I'm listening.
Yeah, Barbara, I was wondering, when you was there, was you there when that, I don't know if he was a overseer, but he committed suicide by jumping off the building at Watchtower?
I'm not laughing at him. I'm laughing at your question, because when we were talking about that, well, he was having phone trouble. I didn't give the answer. I said, that's next week. Next 2 weeks from, I'm going to discuss that. Mm-hmm. That's a very, very, I think, extremely interesting story. And my husband does too, because he was saying to me today, he says, you know, maybe they're not interested in all this stuff. I said, oh, when they hear about Richard's story, yeah. I said, I do think they will be fascinated at the sadness and how much one person can inflict on other people's lives because of the control that we allowed them to have in the name of God. So
yeah. And Barbara, did you I know that you had sued the Watchtower when they disfellowshipped you. How did that end up? Did you win that case?
No. We would have won. I know we would have won. We had it all. You know, when I was in the running department, the 30th chapter of the Proclaimer's book is one I worked on. I mean, a lot of work is in that. It's the constitutional law, all the cases that went to the Supreme Court. I really knew a lot about this after I finished. I was studying. So when I sued the Watchtower, after we was on Dateline, and the way that they had their interviews with some Bethelites, the way they talked about me in the newspaper, you know, so I sued them for slander and other things. So anyway, we had 8 things that we were suing on. The lawyer was a very, very wonderful man who volunteered. I didn't know him. He was from South Carolina, and his mother-in-law was a witness. And he heard about the case, and he was Methodist. He wanted to handle it. He said, you know, it says kind of a case that'll have to go to the Supreme Court, and it's cost $1 million. He said, well, I got $1 million and more, and I will do this. So my local lawyer and we had worked all this out before this guy appeared, and we pretty much knew it. I had a wonderful, wonderful local lawyer, and he's a guy who years ago he sued over the Moonies, because they were forbidding the Moonies to sell at the roses at the airport anymore, and he proved that constitutionally they had the right to do that, and so he's responsible for that. So he knew a lot about this kind of stuff. He took one of the witnesses was washing his windows, and so she mentioned to him about me, and he said, why don't you come in and we'll talk. We did, and he took the case, and so we knew we had the goods. And so when the other guy came on, the Methodist, who was really loving man, kind, and his wife was an ex-witness, and she was disfellowshipped, but he didn't know much about all of that. And so he did the complaint, and he put in there one of our complaints was on disfellowshipping, and so I told him not to. I said, it's going to get thrown out of court if you do that. He said, and he made his millions in auto accidents and seat belts and all the law for all of that. He didn't know constitutional law, but I said, you're going to ruin this case if we have to have disfellowshipping as a cause in there. I want it because his wife. He found out his wife was disfellowship, and nobody would talk to her of her family, of some of her family. So. He just mowed us down. He had the money. We didn't have money. The lawyer here was good, but he didn't. He had a ranch. Actually, he had cattle and everything. That's how he made his money. So, so what happened was the local judge that heard the case. He thought it was great. He became ill. In fact, he died shortly after. And the Watchtower, there was some. Oh, I can't think of the legal name right now, to have the case reviewed. And because he was sick, he let it go on. Why my mind was, anyway, so he let the case go on, and it became too big of a problem, and they let it get appealed. That's the whole gist of this. It was appealed. It took 2 years. I knew we were going to lose. So did my local lawyer. The justices at the appeal court in Nashville, they didn't even do any research. They didn't have to. It was that eighth cause, disfellowshipping. It's a belief. You cannot, secular courts cannot get involved in belief. And that was it. They don't have to look at, we had all kinds of things that I had on them. And they wouldn't even look beyond it because of that. Now, maybe another court, a Supreme Court, would have looked beyond, but these people were a little lazy and didn't bother to do any investigating. And they just saw that and the rule, like I said, is secular courts cannot get involved in a religious belief. So,
Wow.
stopped it. It's cold. So I don't mean to be, but I'm a free advisor to any lawyer that wants to talk to me, and I do talk to them. I have to say, they don't listen all the time. That's their right, and I don't know really a lot of things at their end, the legal element, but I sure know Jehovah's Witnesses' end of this argument, and so anyway, we work it out. And nowadays, most of the lawyers, they through Irving Zalkin, who really knows after all these years, and he picked our brain on all of this JW stuff, and he is the leader. All the other attorneys who take these, they know what they're doing. Yeah, they hardly ever, which is good because I don't have the time. I'd love to, I love to do this work, but I got to clean the house and cook and
Well, Barbara, you're a busy woman. We got time for one more call, then we can cut you loose and let you rest here a little bit. We really appreciate you all.
Hello.
Go ahead. You're on with us.
Hello. Hello.
Let's go with the sister.
Question?
Yeah, let's go with Christine.
Hello?
Go ahead, Christine.
Hi, Rick. Listen, Barbara, it's been a real pleasure to hear your story, and it's been a wonderful feature that Rick brought you in. I'm so glad. I did have a question because I had heard that when you were disfellowshipped, your family, they all shunned you. Now, has there been any change recently or since then that you've had any family members come out and be a part of your life?
No. My mom and my dad are deceased. And my mother did leave the witnesses after I got home, and she started reading what I had on the child abuse. And I have a sister-in-law. My brother's is deceased, and my sister-in-law, she's one of 11 siblings. They're all witnesses, the ones that are alive. She lives with us, and she's shunned by everybody. She's that huge family. I don't have a big family. And our son is all we had, and he shuns us. And we have 2 grandchildren that we don't know. I mean, the girl, we didn't even know I had a girl until she was 11 or 12, and they found out through someone else that they had a little girl. She's 16 now. The boy is 22. We saw him when he was 2 or 3, I think, last time. There's no movement there at all, and I can't say that I blame him or not. I don't have any motive to say either one. He has a right to do what he wants to do, and we love him to death, and he has left his mark on our life. And there's a Wake magazine with the whole back cover of his letter to his wonderful parents. We were wonderful, but it was conditional. As soon as we left the organization, we no longer were wonderful. But we trained him to be this way. I got to say that. I tell that to everybody, you know. We did it from
I know that you stated earlier that we're all suffering in the similar way, you know, all of us who have come out. And I just want you to know that my heart breaks for you on that, because you know, how many people would want to have you as a mother or a grandmother? I would.
I'll adopt you. I'll adopt any. Well, actually, it's so sweet.
I'll be I have been fortunate that all 3 of my children are out.
That's
so cool. I have to brag about that, but it has been painful. It's still painful though, because I raised them, you know, in the cult, and they all have the psychological effects of what we all went through. That cannot be undone. It cannot be undone.
No, I know. We can free them up a little by saying facts like what I do, and it can help them, free them to know that it's not them. You know, you always blame yourself, and you think you don't. And then there's always a thought, well, maybe it's correct. Maybe they are telling the truth. You know, that's human. I know. And as long as I have breath, and I accidentally ended up with this knowledge, I'm going to talk about it, but I didn't for years. I wrote on the important things. Child abuse at that point was the most important thing. And we've covered it. The lawyers are taking care of it. The law is, you know, there, like my lawyer says, there is no justice. There is just the law. And that is the truth. If the law is bad, you have the consequences that are bad. And if the courts do better on child abuse, and they are working at it, that's for sure. And I guess other churches, Jehovah's Witnesses don't have a good reputation because child abuse is hung on their name. And so they got to change their whole reputation to do something else so they can get away from it. So we all did it. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one with the child abuse. I've had a lot of people that work with me behind the scenes on the child abuse, with the lawyers, with so many wonderful worldly people who didn't have an axe to grind, but they loved children. And it's just not fair what we did to the children in the name of a religion. And it's not only child abuse. We were
the truth of it is there are many sincere Jehovah's Witnesses that if they had the information, if they could get the truth about what's going on, they would walk away. Because that's what I did. I walked away because of that issue.
They are doing it. I'm telling you, I hear from them. They are. It's slow, but this is 20 years that I've been doing this. And it is remarkable how many have left. They use the same numbers. They always have used about how many are in the organization. And 8 million. Now they say 8.5 million. Ha ha ha. I know better. I know better. They've been lying ever since I was there. And I know because one of the main people told me so. How the figures are.
Tell us what your opinion is about how many how much of a lie are they putting out when they say there are 8.5 million witnesses? How much? Like,
Oh,
is that? I
it's
mean,
not good.
do you
It's
have
not.
any
It's not
information about how?
because
What was
I
the
have enough
number? What
people
was
who
your
call
estimate?
me that tell me the kingdom halls are empty. Even now, with it back, they can go back to the kingdom halls. They just aren't supporting. The 2-year break really broke the Watchtower and many other religions. People just don't go back to this kind of control after they've been free. So I heard last week about
What
this.
would you say?
Halls, they only.
What is your best guess, Barbara? What is your best guess as to what the number truly is?
Well, my guess would be what others are telling me, 3 to 4 million. That's about all.
What was that?
3 to 4 million.
Oh, that's what. Okay, that's what I thought. I thought it would be a big number that would be reduced.
And you know how they count? They count different too. So if a person talks 2 minutes, they get counted as a minister. Mind you, a minister. That's what they claim when they're being interviewed. We have 8.5 million ministers. They did. I'll have to correct myself. They did, but they don't do that anymore because of liability and agency. We can go into a whole discussion. We should one week on agency and how the Watchtower is moving away. You are an individual. You are not a member of this organization. If you're a member, then the agency might kick in, and then they're responsible when you do something wrong as one of their members. Oh, it is a doozy.
May I just ask a quick question?
We got one more question, then we're going to cut to the other program. So keep it quick. Go ahead.
Just a very quick question. I just wondered, do the governing body live full time at the headquarters, or do they have palatial residences elsewhere?
The palatial residences are only at branches, and if they make a branch that's palatial, which the Argentina branch is palatial, huge floors of rooms. I mean, 4,000 square foot to one place. That I have fully done research on. They can go anywhere and stay at a luxurious branch. In fact, even when I was there, each member had an apartment at other branches. I mean, why wouldn't you stay there? Why do you need a museum type of a palatial mansion when you can have everything done for you at a extraordinarily beautiful suite of rooms? I mean, everything is done. My mother used to laugh at me when I come home. She said, you're like a queen. She said, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do your own clothes. You don't have to do anything. Don't whine to me about how hard life is. So we were, if you, it's how you look at it. But those men, Nor had beautiful residences. He had a whole floor. So did many of the other people, while the ones underneath had a community bathroom on a whole floor at the 124 building, the original one. So, it's human. If we allow this, nobody blame ourselves. If we support an organization like this, and maybe we like that way. We like our leaders like that. See, that's where individualism comes in. So, we're all needy, and we all have our needs filled. And my need was, like I said before, I wanted fairness for everybody in the world. The Bible filled it. So others they like the Watchtower the way it is. And they don't want to hear anything negative about it. And others don't want to lose their family over it. So you have your reasons. But you know what? These kind of religions are going out of style. Really. And so all of them are not. I follow all of that. They're all decreasing. Empty pews everywhere. Empty. And I got to quit because I'm sick of my own voice, and I bet you are.
Well, no, you just relax here for a second. But I really like the way you're sounding here lately. I really do like it. And the people listening into the 6 screens, they're very happy too. I know that the Watchtower, and I'm glad to see that you do understand that it's hurt so many people, but I can understand the connection to it as well. Hey, Barbara, we got so much more to talk about. We're going to carry it on 2 weeks.
Yeah. We'll have fun another time and get ask the questions, and I'll never run out. You got to be assured now. Your ears will run out before I do.
Well, I know you don't, but I don't want to get Joe all upset with you either. I don't want to keep you one off.
He's asleep on his chair.
Well, I'm not Max Larson here, you know that, but Ted Jarrett.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be easy on you. So this is good. But Barbara, thank you very much for wanting to come on here tonight. You really helped a lot of people, and it was shocking.
I hope so.
The next 2 weeks, you're going to come back on more shocking stuff. So you just relax. And we really appreciate you coming on and being with us tonight. Thank you, Barbara Anderson.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking for me to do this. I
Well,
really like associating with all you guys. It's like turning back the clock.
Well, there you go. Well, we're glad to have you part of our arrangement here. Thank you, Barbara. You keep waving that flag of victory. I'll be in touch with you. We'll be going over some more stuff for the next week or two. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have